Hey, sports fans, welcome to the Nuts and Bolts Sports Association NBA podcast. This is episode 20. Can't believe we've made it to the Big 20, but we are here. Joining me, as he did last week, Henry. Raj would be joining us. He is currently doing other adult things in life with his job, so he'll be back later in the week. But Henry and I will be happy to hold it down for today. We're going to get right into it. Biggest thing we saw yesterday, we had Clippers Nuggets game 6. Clippers once again jumped ahead to an early 15-point lead in the first half, seemed to be in cruise control on their way to a series win. And then the second half, Denver took over, outscored them 64-35, and came from behind once again to win 111-98. Series is now tied. Game 7 tomorrow night. Clippers reeling right now, back-to-back 15-point losses. Denver playing some of their best basketball. They don't seem to be bothered by anything. They're embracing being down 3-1 once again. Henry, I'll turn it to you first. What have you seen kind of from Denver in these last two games, and what are your expectations for Game 7? We thought the Clippers would pretty much be indestructible, at least until the Lakers series, but it appears they're really going to have to fight if they want to advance. So what do you see?
Yeah, I'm honestly not that surprised by the Nuggets comeback because we did see it in the first round against the Jazz. So I think it was you could kind of see it coming because Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic are playing the best basketball of their career so far. Jokic had 34 points and 14 rebounds in the last game against the Clippers. I mean, I feel like we all saw him taking crazy shots and making them. So he was, very Kobe-esque himself for a man that doesn't look or isn't very athletic himself. So he was making it happen. And I feel like he caused a lot of turmoil for the Clippers because the Clippers are in the same situation where they're up 3-1. This happened back in 2015 against the Rockets, heading into the Western Conference Finals. They let that opportunity slip up. Is that going to happen again? Is that going to happen against a much more inexperienced Denver Nuggets team? If that does, then the offseason, obviously, there's going to be a lot of changes. I don't think Doc Rivers would go anywhere, let's say, if they lose Game 7, but a lot of revitalization for the franchise, of course. Mike Malone is doing an amazing job. He has so much faith in his team when everybody was writing him off. I mean, I think everybody heard Stephen A. and all those guys talking about how the series is done. It's 3-1, but Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, all those guys, Gary Harris, Paul Millsap, they're, like you said, in your phrase, they're dogs, but in the best way possible. I think the Clippers need to figure it out because they're giving up 16, 15-point leads. That's very unacceptable, especially in the playoffs right now. They put themselves in a do-or-die situation that could have easily been avoided. But just turning it back to you, what do you think the Clippers have to do in Game 7 in order to advance to the Western Conference Finals?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be the first to say I'm really surprised. Being a Lakers fan, I was kind of looking ahead to that Clippers-Lakers Western Conference Finals. I kind of think like we all were. And I really thought especially when I saw the first half score, I thought, okay, the Clippers aren't going to blow another lead. They have this in cruise control. They're ready to go. And it's concerning. It seems like offensively they are kind of, I don't say being lazy, but not running all the sets. It turns into a lot of like one-on-one where it's like, hey, Paul George, you go one-on-one against this guy. Now Lou Williams does, and Kawhi. And I just don't think that's a good strategy. And on defense, they just look lost. I mean, Jokic and Murray have really had their way these last two games. Jokic was always going to be kind of a mismatch issue for the Clippers because they don't really have a big guy that can contain him. Zubac is too slow and not a good enough defender. Harrell brings the energy, but he's got a severe, height and size difference, and he really hasn't been good at all. I think I saw the stat. He's got like 14 or 15 rebounds through 6 games in the series. This is a guy who's the 6th man of the year and averaged like 8 rebounds a game. So that's a huge area of concern for them. I still think the Clippers can win. I think we wouldn't be surprised if they did win tomorrow and move on to the conference finals. However, my faith in that is definitely dropped a lot because Denver, give them credit. They have done this earlier in this postseason. Yep. They did it last season with a couple of Game 7s. They're very experienced in these big games, and that plays a big role, especially mentally. I always talk about Game 7s as we'll get to the Celtics and the Raptors in a minute here with their Game 7. Everybody gets tight. Everyone mentally, for whatever reason, that pressure of Game 7 gets to a lot of guys, and you don't always see the best performances. But Denver, has such experience in these last 2 years with that. I think that's going to benefit them greatly. If I had to pick, I would still say probably the Clippers by a couple of points, just because of the Kawhi Leonard factor. I think at the end of the day, he's still the best player on the court, and in a big game, that can sometimes be the deciding factor more so than anything else. However, if the Nuggets come out playing as well as they have offensively early in the game and make the Clippers play from behind, I think that's not going to bode well. I think you might see them fold a little bit under pressure. Who do you have winning tomorrow?
I was actually going to ask you. I don't know, in your opinion, what do you think outweighs one another? The Clippers' lack on defense, or was it more Jokic and Murray playing their best basketball? Like they were practically unstoppable. I mean, the way they were taking it to the hole, and like I was saying,
Mm-hmm.
Jokic was making some pretty incredible shots that you don't really expect a big man of his caliber in terms of the way he's lacking agility and everything to make. And especially contested when the shot clock's winding down, it's kind of hard to see because Stephen A. Smith said himself that Kawhi Leonard should hold most or if all of the blame for their loss in game 6. And I think that's too much on Kawhi Leonard because he's a great defensive player himself. But the Clippers, they were late on the rotation, just recovering and getting to their spot and contesting the threes. It was kind of lackluster. I mean, Torrey Craig gave him the lead in the third quarter. There's a lot of things going there. Personally, I do see the Clippers closing out the Nuggets just because they do have that Kawhi Leonard factor.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, Paul George did have 33 points in game 6. So if the question is, can he do that again in game 7 when it matters most? Because Paul George, his play has been like a roller coaster ride throughout these whole playoffs. I think we can all see him going up and down, up and down. So in the most critical moment, is he able to put his team on his back as well and not just let Kawhi Leonard be the most reliable factor, because they obviously acquired him for a reason, because he's able to close out games and series as well. I got my money on the Clippers, but I wouldn't be surprised if Denver comes out on top because they have more of a structured team in terms of just rotating the ball through all their players. And I feel like when Jamal Murray or Jokic are struggling, they can look to their role players like Torrey Craig, Gary Harris, Paul Millsap to step up and just, take the load from them, because we can see that Murray, he had 21 points, but he's not putting up the same numbers he did the last round. But,
Right.
Can we see a 50-point performance from him again? Or can we see Jokic go again for 30 plus and 15 rebounds? That's obviously to be decided for everybody to see. But ultimately, I do see the Clippers winning it. And like you said, I've already been looking ahead towards the Clippers-Lakers matchup. So this caught me really off guard. I think it caught everybody off guard. But kudos to the Nuggets for shutting everybody up, including us.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, no matter what happens tomorrow, I think Denver deserves a lot of credit, because I would have thought this was a 5-game series. I know Ross said this was going to be a 4 or 5-game series at the beginning. So they've definitely proved everybody wrong and have earned, the respect of their peers in that regard. I do agree, although, with what you're saying. I think it's going to take, for as well as Denver's been playing, they really are going to have 2 like A-level games from Jokic and Murray. I don't think just one game, like one can't struggle and the other can do well. Like if Jokic has a big game and Murray stinks, they're not going to win, and vice versa. So I think you need to have both of them playing their best basketball tomorrow. For the Clippers, I saw the thing with the Kawhi Leonard blame. I mean, he didn't have his best game, but I look at him being the best player on the floor on both ends, being able to affect the game so much. And you look at his teammates, like you mentioned, Paul George has been up and down. He was, he had 33 points, but he was a minus 23 in the 39 minutes he played. Montrezl, 6th man of the year, minus 19 in 15 minutes, just 5 points, pretty much ineffective. Even Lou Williams, their other, 6th man of the year, guys, been so crucial for them throughout the year with that second unit, 14 points, but minus 10 in 24 minutes. He's had an atrocious, series in terms of his shooting and playmaking. So the other guys really aren't helping out Kawhi at all. I think Kawhi is still going to be fine. I expect him to have a really big game. As we know from last year, he had a big game 7 against the Sixers. So this is nothing new to him. But, for Paul George, you have a guy that's been bounced early in the playoffs the last couple of years. And kind of in a really bad losses. So I wonder if that's going to, how he's going to come out mentally. You have these, Lou Williams and Montrezl. Can they get going? I mean, there's a lot more questions for the Clippers than I think Denver. But I do agree with you. Like I said, I think at the end of the day, having the best player on the floor in Kawhi is going to give the Clippers just a slight edge. And then we'll obviously, have them, advance and play the Lakers in the conference finals. We'll get to the Lakers in a little bit, but we do have to touch on your boys in Boston, Celtics with a huge Game 7, a very stressful Game 7 win over the Raptors. I believe it was 92-87. So the classic, defensive slugfest in a Game 7, a lot of missed shots. We'll do it in two parts. So the first part, we'll let you go. Just give us your thoughts on the game, especially being someone who watches the Celtics a lot. What did you like? What did you not like? That kind of stuff. And then once we do that, we'll go back and we'll discuss. We'll do a little Eastern Conference Finals preview. Now that we know they're going to be facing the Heat, but if you want to start off here, just give us some thoughts on the game.
All right, first of all, that game gave me a heart attack all the way through, but for the right reasons, just seeing a team that you follow a lot come out on top in a game seven, especially, it's difficult to see the process because we were up 2-0, and like I said before in other streams, OG Anunoby's half-second shot changed the trajectory of the whole series. Props to the Raptors. Fred VanVleet, he scored 20 points in Game 7. Kyle Lowry fouled out. He didn't have his best game. He could have, but Jason Tatum, 29 points. So young, but he's gaining so much experience already in his third season. I really do believe he can lead the Celtics this year, to the pinnacle of success. Jaylen Brown, he had 21 points. He did struggle throughout the game. He had his mishaps and his hiccups here and there, but he wanted to show how consistent he can be himself because we've all seen the series. There's a game where he went 2 of 11 from 3, and those are just very unacceptable performances from someone of his caliber. But Marcus Smart, someone said on Twitter, Marcus Smart was playing like Gordon Hayward if he's in an all defensive team. And it just goes to show that Marcus Smart was putting off offensive numbers. He had 16 points in Game 7. He's not really known for his scoring, but I think we all saw that block on Norman Powell as well at the end of the game. Jason Tatum's rebound. Grant Williams missed both free throws, which were very crucial. But as much as I want to say that it was a lot of efficiency on our side, there's a lot of luck there too, and just in the way we're able to position ourselves. But thankfully, Brad Stevens and the boys, they're able to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time since 2018. They're obviously a lot more experienced from back then. Jason Tatum, as young as he is, I do believe that he's going to be a matchup nightmare for any team he goes up against. They go up against the Miami Heat now, and the Miami Heat, as you can see, they're no joke. Jimmy Butler is probably right now the most intimidating man in the playoffs, just because he has such a good support system around him. I think the chemistry that the Heat portray match what the Lakers have. I think we can all see like the Lakers, what type of team chemistry they have. I think the Miami Heat are right up there too. The way they're all on the same page on the floor. Jimmy Butler, Jay Crowder, Goran Dragic. No, but Duncan Robinson made his name this year, and he's just so immersed into the system now that it's like they've all been together for the past 5-7 years. So it's really a testimony to Eric Spoelstra's system. So I'm curious to see how it's going to go against Brad Stevens' system, because one thing that I want to highlight that the Celtics need to obviously improve is their bench production. Our bench players can be they can be a liability on offense and defense. I think our best player off the bench is Wanamaker, and Wanamaker has been able to hold his own, but is he going to be able to hold his own against a Tyler Hero or a Duncan Robinson or anybody else coming off the bench? There's a lot of questions up in there, but that Game 7 against Toronto, I almost had an aneurysm, but but I'm glad that didn't happen. So I'm looking forward to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, for sure. It was a good, I thought it was a really good win by Boston. They didn't necessarily get the best shooting performances from some of their guys, but I also, as I've talked about so many times, that happens in Game 7. You see guys start short-arming shots. Everyone's just a little bit more tense. But, the Celtics, they won. They won a lot of the hustle plays. Marcus Smart, like I said, with the chase down block. They did all the little things late to get them the win. And Tatum really was very, very good all around. I mean, 9 of 23 isn't like the best shooting performance, but it's also not terrible. And the fact that he was able to pile on 12 rebounds, 7 assists, he was +5 in 44 minutes. I mean, for a kid of his age, being 20, 21 years old, I mean that's phenomenal to ask. He's the youngest guy to have those numbers in a Game 7 since his idol Kobe. So huge credit to Tatum there. I personally love watching him play. As for Toronto, I think they did, given the circumstances, did the best they could this year. I mean, really, I think outshone all expectations. So huge credits to Nick Nurse and those guys. But I also really wasn't surprised that they didn't play well in Game 7. Van Fleet was a little more surprising because I thought he was a little bit more consistent of a guy. But as I talked about with some of the Celtics fans, we were doing the live stream for it on Friday. Kyle Lowry is never a guy to me, that he does a lot of stuff that doesn't show up in the box score. Like, takes the charges, he takes the top point guard roles on defense and does a pretty good job there. So I have to give him credit. However, I just don't see him show up in big games a lot. He, even last year, for all the success that they had, he was still pretty hit and miss. Like, it was still Siakam and Kawhi most nights, and when he chipped in, they were almost unbeatable, as we saw, in the conference finals and the finals. But when he stinks, man, he stinks. I mean, 5 of 15 from the field, 16 points. He fouls out, -10, 41 minutes, and that's pretty bad. And that's unfortunately something that we're kind of accustomed to seeing from Kyle Lowry. His numbers always dip in the playoffs. Whether it's percentages or just total, cumulative stats. So that's something that, this Toronto team is kind of in limbo, right? They had Kawhi, he left, they won the title, everything was great. They kind of just made one last run this year, but you have, I think, Marc Gasol's an expiring contract. I think Ibaka is too. Kyle Lowry's getting older. Van Fleet is going to demand a lot of money. So Masai Ujiri, the GM, who's done a great job building that team, is now in a very tough position because they have to bring back the correct pieces, add anybody new via the draft or free agency that might be able to assist them, but also help with this aging lineup. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do in this offseason. But again, I think the main point is kudos to Boston. I think Boston Miami is just going to be a real fun series. I would say anything less than 6 or 7 games would be just. It would just be rude to the fans.
Disappointing. Yeah. Like there's just so much build up to it. You don't want it to end in a sweep, or I don't see a sweep happening on either side. But 5 games, 6 games, like you said, anything less than 5 games, I feel like they just play with our emotions on that part. But I want to take it back to Toronto's roster and what they can do better, because Pascal Siakam, he had 13 points and 11 rebounds in Game 7, but his output in the regular, his output in the regular season, he averages 23 points, and we all saw his performance and his productivity in the playoffs drastically drop. And I feel like everybody's in the same consensus of, we know as just viewers and spectators that Pascal Siakam is going to go with his back to the basket. And if we're able to see that, imagine the Celtics being able to adjust so easily to that in film or during the game. I feel like the offseason is going to be Pascal Siakam's opportunity to expand his game as well, as well as he did play in the playoffs last year. This year, showed a lot of flaws in him, and I do believe in him. He's an all-star for a reason. He was the one that kept the Raptors afloat in terms of the regular season and keeping them relevant as well after Kawhi left. So there's a lot of hope in him. He's young, but he can't let these things be consistent in his career. Just just dropping in productivity, performance, statistically, and every single category in the playoffs, because the playoffs is all that matters. So the Raptors, I'm going to be interested to see what he does. Nick Nurse obviously staying. I feel like he's going to be the next Greg Popovich. We could argue on that in terms of his longevity with one
bold
franchise.
Statement.
Yeah, and well, in terms of longevity with one franchise, I'm not saying he's going to get 5 rings or he's going to get 6 rings, but I can see him being in the head coach for the Raptors in the long term, because he's been able to prove himself like, hey, we were still the number 2 seed in the regular season without a Kawhi Leonard. So he's showed that he's able to mold a system around a team instead of just one player. So as a Celtics fan, I'm saying this too. I do believe in Nick Nurse and what he's doing for the team, but there's just a lot of questions airing out. Kyle Lowry is going to go into his 15th season, which is kind of crazy to think.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's really up there in age, but he's still playing high level basketball in the regular season. In the postseason, he was putting up great numbers as well. But obviously, what we saw in Game 7, especially fouling out in the most crucial game, that was unacceptable in himself. Daniel Tice fouled out in the funniest way. I don't know if you saw that. He had 5 fouls and then he came back into the game.
Like 11 seconds, right?
The first play, he fouled out immediately. And I think that's, if the Celtics want to beat the Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals, Daniel Tice needs to play like an elite big man. I know that's a lot to ask from him, but he's going to go up against Bam Adebayo. He's going to go up against Derek Jones Jr. He's just going to go up against players that are much more athletic than him and can probably beat him off the dribble, because I saw way too many times him getting beat off the dribble by Fred VanVleet, who's barely reaching 6 feet. So those are things that are unacceptable on his part, but he's been able to hold his own, yes. But if the Celtics want a chance, like I said, Grant Williams coming off the bench, solid player, but we saw, down the stretch when he missed those 2 free throws, it's crucial. It shows the inexperience. Robin Williams, Robert Williams, he plays well himself, but in terms of producing offensively, that's where it lacks. And then
Right.
Wanamaker is solid for a good 8 minute stretch at a time, but just keeping Kemba Walker out of the game. That's another thing too. Kemba Walker needs to play like the Kemba Walker we all know, because if he doesn't, I can see him getting bullied by the Heat's defense. I don't think there's going to be a question. Goran Dragic, Tyler Hero, all their perimeter players are just going to beat him down the stretch in offense and defensively. So Kemba Walker, he needs to adjust a lot himself. I'm excited to see what he can do in those situations,
Mhm.
but they have a man named Jimmy Butler over there as well that is probably my biggest worry. Even if he can't keep it up statistically every single game, like you said, he just brings that X factor that the Heat need in order to keep advancing. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Do you have a prediction for the series?
You know what?
To put no biases in there, just look at what you've seen from everybody. Yeah.
No biases. My prediction for the Heat Celtic series, I can see the Heat coming out in 6 or 7, and I'm saying that with my heart hurting right now, but for the right reasons, because Jimmy Butler has a more complete team. Their bench and their starting five are on the same page in terms of their level of productivity and what they can bring, especially in clutch situations. We can't rely on our bench too much as the Heat can. Tyler Hero, he's a rookie, and we were seeing all the things he's able to do. Our rookies, we're not playing Carson Edwards as I think we should play Carson Edwards, because I think we all saw what he did in Purdue back in March Madness, and I feel like he has the capability to do that in the playoffs. But obviously, it's Brad Stevens' system. We're getting Gordon Hayward back, so I think that's a huge plus, obviously, in terms of the matchup. So that Gordon Hayward factor, the one that we missed in the first 2 rounds, I feel like I'm alleviated a bit because I kind of forgot we had Gordon Hayward coming back, but it's going to make things interesting for the Heat. Eric Spoelstra has a lot more playoff experience than Brad Stevens. He has a lot of finals experience. So just that coaching matchup is going to be pretty interesting to see as well, because Brad Stevens knows how to hold his own against the best. Like I said, it's going to be interesting to see. If I do have a prediction, and like I said, it hurts for me to say it, I can see the Heat taking it in 6 or 7 games, and either facing the Lakers or whoever wins this crazy Nuggets Clipper series.
Yeah, and I would probably agree with you. If I had to pinpoint it, I would probably say Heat in 6, but an extremely close 6 games. But I also see a world where it goes 7. I think the point that you made was what I was going to say about the biggest difference between the two teams is that bench play. You have Kendrick Nunn, Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, these dudes coming off the bench that I think when Boston goes to their guys, I just think that that's a huge mismatch. And I think it's going to force them to play Tatum and Brown a lot of minutes, which is what you want ideally in a big playoff series. However, you don't want them to be too tired, from running everything. You want to make sure that they're still efficient. You mentioned the playoff experience. Obviously, Spoelstra has a ton. Being a two-time champion. Excuse me. So Miami's playing arguably the best basketball of anybody in the playoffs. I mean, they're 8-1. They just steamrolled through the Pacers and then dominated the Bucks really from start to finish. So they definitely have all the momentum going. Jimmy Butler, like you said, is a huge X factor, because even if he's not scoring a lot, I think he does so many things. In terms of his playmaking, his defense, a lot of other things that don't show up in the box score. That just really, he's the heart and soul of their team. They rally around him. I think today's his birthday actually. So of course, the night before Game 1, he's getting his little birthday celebration. There's nothing I don't like about Miami, right? They have Adebayo at center, who does so much. He's a great playmaker, defender, kind of fast break starter. You have these good shooters in Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero, and Dragic has been playing very well. You have Jimmy. They have offense, they have defense, they have shooting, they have interior scoring. They just, it's hard to pinpoint a lot of weaknesses that, especially through these first, 9 games that they've played. On Boston's end, what they have going for them, obviously, is that they do have the momentum from Game 7. They're battle tested. They have been playing pretty well. Tatum, I don't know. That's going to be the thing. It's like, who's going to be the best player in the series? Is it going to be Tatum? Is it going to be Jimmy? Could it be Bam? Maybe even Jaylen Brown? Whoever can be the best player in the series, if Tatum can really get to that level, you've talked about it a couple of times here, like the 2018 playoffs where he was, going toe to toe with LeBron in Game 7 and stuff like that. Can he channel that? Can he use that for a full series and be as efficient as he was then now? Because I think even in the Toronto series, he had some really good games, but then he had some games where he did struggle a little bit and was bothered by Toronto's defense. And it's not going to get any easier with Miami. So he needs to be as consistent as he's been. Jaylen Brown has been playing well and scoring the ball better. You need that from him. And you need somebody from the bench. Like you said, there's really not a lot of, I guess, great choices. Wanamaker would be the ideal option, but he does have his good stretches and his rough stretches. And I'm not a big like Kemba fan of his play. I think personally he's a good dude, but like play wise, I just don't trust like a 5'11" point guard in the playoffs, especially against a defense like this. But if he can get it going, that's going to be huge. And then we'll see what Hayward's like. He hasn't missed too much time, so he shouldn't be super rusty. But he's another nice playmaker and shooter for them. He's been he hasn't been crazy far in a lot of playoffs, but he has his own share of playoff experience too. So I think it's gonna be fun. You have again two good coaches. Again, you have Spoelstra and Brad Stevens. So you have another, who's gonna make better adjustments is always something to watch. But I think at the end of the day, Miami does have a good chance of pulling this out, which is crazy, right? Being in the playoffs, we thought, Giannis is going to do it. And then we thought, maybe Toronto, and then Miami was kind of like such an afterthought. Even Boston, everyone's like, hey, Tatum, Brown, Celtics, Lakers, everyone's hyping that storyline up, and kind of everyone kind of just pushed Miami to the side, and yet they could be on the cusp here of their first finals appearance in 6 years. So we'll see. It should be a lot of fun. I'm sure you'll be watching every second of every game with a renewed intensity. But whatever happens in the series, I think you just have to look at it as they've done a great job this year, both teams. Have definitely done a really good job. They've done a great job in these playoffs, beating the teams that they were not favored to beat. But yeah, I said it'll be a fun series. We'll switch it over to the West here. We obviously talked about the Clippers Nuggets. The only other Western Conference game was the Lakers on Saturday, taking care of Houston 119-96. They won that series 4-1. Me as a Lakers fan, I was nervous every second. I thought that the Lakers, their role players stepped up and played very well and shot the ball well, which I think was huge, because if it was just on LeBron and AD, I think that series goes in a little bit different direction. It might still be going right now, but Markieff Morris came in, shot well. Caruso played very well in his minutes. He actually played very good defense against Harden at times. We saw playoff Rondo come in and just really, when he came in, especially game 2, game 3, he really took over those games and kind of was able to take a load off of LeBron's shoulders, so he could just worry about getting easy buckets or getting some rest on the bench. Anthony Davis did a good job exploiting the size mismatches, and we kind of saw again what happens with the Rockets. This is what they do every year. They just get to the second round or the third round of the playoffs. And, Westbrook had a couple of bad games. Harden has the stinker game 4 where he's like 2 of 11 from the field. They just didn't, they did what Toronto or what Houston normally does. And they're kind of in a spot like Toronto, like we talked about, where they don't have a lot of cap flexibility. You have Harden and Westbrook on the books, all this money, and you're kind of just scraping the bottom of the free agent barrel for these 3-and-D wing guys that you hope can plug in. We know D'Antoni's not coming back. He said he was not going to be coming back to the team, so they have a coaching search as well. What did you see that you can talk about, what you saw from the Lakers in the series, maybe what you liked, but more importantly, where does Houston go from here? What is their offseason plan? Because I really don't know what it is. Like, there's really no clear path here. So I'll let you kind of give your thoughts on it.
I think it's pretty interesting. First of all, congrats to you and your boys. I know you're a Laker fan. You always got your blanket behind you.
That's right.
So as a Laker fan, I'm sure you're happy about this, but it was too easy for the Clippers. For the Lakers, that it kind of made it a little embarrassing to be a Rocket fan. I'm talking about for the fan base, because you expect a lot more from Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Mike D'Antoni, and all those guys. Russell Westbrook had 10 points in the last game. It's not acceptable. He got bullied by LeBron the whole series. It was no match whatsoever. I think he got blocked by LeBron too many times that I can count. James Harden, he did have 30 points, but obviously it does not translate to a win. Mike D'Antoni, he's already leaving. He had a statement. James Harden, he signed a 4-year, $107 million contract, and he becomes a free agent in 2023. But obviously, if you want to revitalize the franchise, Do you put James Harden on the table up for a trade? If I were the owner, if I were the general manager at this point, I think so. I think 7 years of coming up short every single time you make the playoffs has been enough. Um, James Harden time in the as a Houston Rocket, I can see it being over, even though he does become a free agent in 3 years. But I think I think fans have seen enough of the same old thing. Like you said, their second round or third round exit, it's the same thing over and over and over and over again. James Harden, great regular season player, but just can't translate any of that into the playoffs. Statistically, yes, he can drop 30 plus still, but it doesn't translate to anything. It doesn't translate to wins. Mike D'Antoni, that's why he left. I don't blame him. I don't really blame him. There's just too much going on there. Plus the small ball experiment. That's done. I think that's done. Obviously Mike D'Antoni's out. PJ Tucker, they're going to probably look for a true center who can compete with these big men, because PJ Tucker played great in game one, but then he just got exposed the rest of the series. For the Rockets in the offseason, I can see a lot of big changes happening. Is Westbrook staying? Are James Harden and Westbrook, how's their relationship going to go off the court, compared to on the court? There's also reports saying that in the locker room after their loss in game four, there was you could hear dispute between players themselves holding each other accountable. And it just goes to show their team chemistry is not where they want it to be. So there's a lot of things that Houston has to do. They're not a bad franchise. They're taking the steps in the right direction in terms of the players they have, but in terms of their coaching staff and the way they go about trying to make it past the second round, trying to make it to the finals, it's been atrocious these past 7 years for James Harden. Honestly, for a player like him, I wish him better, because he does deserve better. I know there's a lot of people that hate on that man, and you know what? I can't blame him at times, but at the same time, the Lakers, the Lakers destroyed another franchise. I really believe that. You know what LeBron did. LeBron just he has the LeBron effect on franchises. I mean, you see what happened with Toronto after he swept them back in 2018. They got rid of DeMar DeRozan. He just I feel bad for opponents that do go against LeBron James, because now Houston is a huge question mark in terms of what they're going to do moving forward. So I want to turn it back to you, especially being a Lakers fan. Now, moving to the Western Conference Finals, we see a trend that the Lakers keep losing game ones. So, but they lose. Then they win four in a row. But it's pretty funny. It's pretty funny to see. But we all know too, as the playoffs keep narrowing down, the competition is only going to get tougher and tougher. They're either going to face the Nuggets or they're going to face the Clippers. Either or, those both teams are much better than the Rockets and the Blazers. So, what do you think the Lakers have to do in order to not allow those early slip ups? Because I feel like that's going to be potentially a lot more dangerous in the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that coming out flat in game one, that you don't want to be fighting an uphill battle in the Western Conference Finals. I think, like we talked about earlier, I think they're going to play the Clippers. That's the holy war that we've been looking forward to all year. If they do end up playing them, I feel better about it than I did a couple weeks ago, like at the beginning of the bubble. I was a little worried. But I think what we've seen with the Clippers in these playoffs, even for the first round as well, is just a lot of inconsistency. Not the greatest perimeter shooting team, and they've just had their lapses where they just offensively and defensively haven't looked sharp and don't seem to have a game plan. So I feel a little bit better about the Lakers kind of exposing that. And I think one thing that's important for the Lakers too is you've seen them. They've kind of gone through these different trials. The first round was, hey, it's Dame and CJ. This that's a huge mismatch for the Lakers because they don't have good guards. Are they going to be able to score enough? This is supposed to be one of the best 8 seeds we ever had. Blah blah blah. And they conquered that. Obviously, Dame getting hurt didn't help, but they were in control of the series at that point. And then it was like, okay, well, they won that one, and now Houston's up. And now you have to deal with almost the upgraded version, right? The upgraded version of Dame and CJ is, Harden, who's, an MVP, and Westbrook, who's also an MVP. And so that's going to be super hard. Harden's going to control everything, and Russ is going to get his switches and his mismatches, and they're going to have to deal with it. And we heard the same stories. And then they went out after game one, and the Lakers exposed them. Right? Everyone's like, oh, PJ Tucker, he's going to be this AD stopper, and he didn't stop AD after game one. Didn't play well on offense. Harden did as usual, and the Lakers conquered that. So I think what's encouraging is that they've conquered these challenges. Right? They've heard it all in the paper and the critics, and they've been able to rise above that. And now, if you get the Clippers, you're no longer like the guards. You don't have this pressure to like, wow, we got to try and contain James Harden or Dame Lillard. It's like it's Pat Beverly, Lou Williams. Paul George is talented in his own right, but he's not somebody you have to worry about from like 35 feet as soon as he comes up court. Like you had to worry about that with Harden and Dame and those dudes because it was like these dudes were threats. Paul George is a little bit more methodical with his offensive stuff, and he likes to just do a lot more ISO one-on-one. So I think they've already, their guards especially are going to get them, not a breather, but a little bit easier of a challenge in this series if it is the Clippers. Obviously, you have the LeBron-Kawhi matchup, which would be huge. Those two, we think, would probably cancel each other out. And then from there, the Clippers had an extremely hard time guarding Anthony Davis in the regular season. I wouldn't expect that to change, especially with how badly we've seen Zubac and Harrell playing against Jokic. And now you have to bring in AD, who's a more athletic version of Jokic. They're about the same outside shooting, but just overall, just a better athlete, right? Jokic is like, I'm going to go slow. I'm going to take my time because I'm not in good shape. AD's like, hey, yeah, AD's like, I'll bring the ball up, I'll dribble through myself, and I'll just blow by you. So it's a different style for them that they're already not able to handle Jokic. So I don't know how they'd handle anything faster. And then obviously, like I said, the role players clicking right now for Lakers is huge. I mean, some of the guys' numbers from the last series, Rondo shot 44% from three. Danny Green found a shot was 42%. Markieff Morris was 50% from three. Even Caruso, 35% and played really good defense. So I mean, it's encouraging that their role players are really stepping up because that's what they need, right? LeBron and AD are going to bring it, but when you get to a series like against potentially the Clippers, those guys are going to be doubled, and they're going to make those role players beat them. So if they can continue to do that, I have a better feeling about it than I did a couple weeks ago. If they play Denver, which is still a very likely option, I like that matchup even more. I like them against Denver in the regular season. They played pretty well in all their games. I believe they won every game. You saw, AD has the size and athleticism to deal with Jokic that the Clippers do not have. And then on defense, Jokic, he can make Jokic work, try to get him into foul trouble. Millsap's not really a guy you can put on AD because he's a little bit older now and has the size mismatch. And then, I don't think you could pick anybody on Denver that you'd say would be confident trying to slow down LeBron. Gary Harris is still working his way back. He's undersized. Michael Porter Jr. is a rookie. Will Barton's not in the series, which Raj has talked about is very huge. And then I think Jamal Murray. I think the Lakers did a good enough job on Harden and Westbrook that Jamal Murray would be a manageable task as well. So I would like that even more. That would be like Lakers in 5, Lakers in 6. If it's the Lakers Clippers, I think it's a 6 or 7 game series, no matter who wins it. But I would, as a Lakers fan, I'm rooting for the Denver matchup. I'd rather take the Denver one. But I do think LA can win either series. It's going to be tough. The good news is the Lakers, they're all playing well. The role players are playing well, and they look really focused. I think you saw a little bit of a lapse in game 4, and they came out in game 5 and did not allow it to happen once. They played a super focused 48 minutes. I think they know, you're seeing, LeBron's done this, right? We've seen him be in the playoffs how many years now, how many finals, 8 in a row, whatever he had at one point. And I think with time, also with having Rondo with a ton of playoff experience, they're really helping these guys like Anthony Davis, Kuzma, Caruso, guys who haven't necessarily been in the playoffs or gone very far. I think that having that veteran experience really helps them. We can talk about playoff Rondo for hours if we wanted to. But I think they're in a good spot right now. I'm much more confident in them than I was at the beginning of the year. But at the end of the day, you got to go out there and you got to play a good game 1, no matter who it is. You want to take control of the series right away. You never want to play from behind. So I'm excited. It's been a long time. It's been 10 years.
It's been 10 years.
I don't know what you were doing 10 years ago, but I was still in high school. So it's exciting to be back. Do you have any final thoughts on what would be maybe a better matchup for the Lakers? Like who would they want to play or anything you're looking forward to?
Like I said, as much as I hate the Lakers, I'll give it to you guys. You guys are playing, obviously, your best basketball in 10 years. The last time you guys went this far was against Steve Nash against the Phoenix Suns back in 2010, which was literally a decade ago, which is crazy to think. So it took a decade of adversities for the Lakers to come back to this point. And I think the Lakers have the upper hand on any team they face because of 3 people. Rondo, LeBron, and Danny Green. Why? Because those three players have finals experience. So they know what it feels like to keep playing at a high level as the Larry O'Brien trophy keeps narrowing down to their view. They don't fold, they don't seize under pressure. We see playoff Rondo is a thing because he won his first ring back in 2008 with the Boston Celtics when he was first starting off in his career. He was such a huge asset then, and then people were like, okay, when he progresses in his career, what else can he do? We see how much of a second coach he is on the floor and how much of a facilitator he is. Danny Green just came off of a championship with the Toronto Raptors. He won a championship with the San Antonio Spurs. He's such a big piece himself because he he immerses himself in any offense and any team that he plays for so well that he's one of those nomad players where he's able to travel to any franchise and become a huge piece. Obviously, LeBron James, he dominated the 2010s. He had what eight finals appearances in a row. That's a huge factor. Now think about it like this: Kawhi Leonard, he won a championship last year, but aside from him on the Clippers roster, who else has finals experience?
Nobody major that I can think of.
Mm-mm. Paul George, the most he's gone to was the Eastern Conference Finals, getting
Right.
beat by who? LeBron
LeBron.
James. LeBron James. And now think about it like this: the Denver Nuggets, they're such an up and coming team, and they're accumulating their Game 7 experiences and their playoff experiences. But the most they've gone to was the second round. And we got a Jamal Murray, we got a Nikola Jokic, but it's just that experience factor. Why do you think Rondo is playing so damn well? Because he's been able to have the ball in his hands in the most pressure filled situations, facing a Laker team back 10 years ago, which is funny how the universe works, right? Now Rondo's a Laker 10 years before he was on the Celtics. It's I forgot who I was talking to, but this is too movie like for me to believe that the Lakers won't make the finals because that's just the trajectory I see. That's where they're meant to be this year. If it didn't happen last year, it was for a reason. We got Alonzo Ball, you got a Brandon Ingram, you got a Josh Hart that had so much growing to do that it was not going to work. And LeBron was out of the playoffs for the first time, and I don't know how long, but obviously it was disappointing for his career. But now heading into the Western Conference Finals, these past 10 years have been so crazy. You go through four different head coaches, you get rid of your lottery picks. So many things have happened in the Lakers franchise just to get back to this point. So as a Laker fan, I'm pretty sure you would be pretty disappointed to get eliminated at this point, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I tell my Laker friends, I'm like, if you guys get eliminated, I'll be bummed out for you guys because at this point, like, I am rooting for that cause in terms of how long it took to get back here. As storied as a franchise the Lakers are, they faced their toughest 10 years in their storied franchise.
Hmm.
So with that being said, I can see the Lakers moving past the Western Conference Finals against the Clippers, against the Nuggets, either in a game 5 through game 7. That's like the fold there. Depends obviously who they face and how the series is going to go.
Hmm.
I like to look ahead for the Lakers, as much as it hurts me to say, to be finals contenders this year because they're too much of a complete team. I'll be honest, I don't think I've seen this much of a complete roster in such a long time
And
because
they have good chemistry too. That's the thing.
they
Like
have
they're
great
all on the
chemistry.
same way, kind of
Mhm.
like Miami. They're on that. They just have that team chemistry flowing right now. So I think that helps too.
Yeah, so we see that like a LeBron team. Now, 10 years ago, LeBron, he was with the Mo Williams, he was with the Anderson Varejãos. Obviously, he
Hmm.
had to do everything on the team, but now he's in such a new position in his career where he has Anthony Davis, he has players coming off the bench, he has players like Alex Caruso that are so up and coming themselves, but they're able to hold it. I feel like Alex Caruso gets his
He's the
abilities and yeah from the
yep.
support of his teammates. If he were playing for the Washington Wizards or he were playing for the Hornets, I don't think he would be as relevant or as productive as he is with the Lakers because I'll give it to you guys. You guys feed off of each other, especially
Hmm.
from your best players. So, kudos to the Lakers. Frank Vogel is doing an amazing job. Jason Kidd as an assistant coach. You guys have it all, but now we've seen LeBron in the past choke himself in terms of getting to the finals, or when it comes down to the ultimate competition, he seems to fold and himself.
Hmm.
So going up against a Kawhi Leonard, a Jokic, a Jamal Murray, how is he gonna? Because yeah, like you said, they're not James Harden, they're not Damian Lillard. They were predictable more coming off from the half court in terms of like now you got to guard him 35 feet out,
Hmm.
but now you have to adjust to a Kawhi Leonard who can practically do anything, and we all see
Yeah.
his big hands and everything. He has so much potential and capability in terms of what to do with the strongest competition. Paul George, as much as he's been up and down in these series and his performance and everything, he's still Paul George, the guy that would play against the Miami Heat, LeBron, and would emerge himself as a superstar. I
Hmm.
feel like it really is a mental battle with him. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in game 7 moving forward. Jamal Murray, obviously, I think this playoffs finally put him on the map for everybody, especially that round 1 against the Utah Jazz. It'll be interesting to see if they move on to see what he does against LeBron James, Anthony Davis. But I really want to ask you, aside from those two players that we know um, lead the team statistically, as in LeBron and AD, who do
Hmm.
you think is the biggest factor aside from them two, and aside from Rondo too, because we have those three on the top. Aside from them, who do you think needs to play at their very best in order to assure their spot in the NBA Finals this year?
Yeah, I think you mentioned those three are definitely the top ones. Danny Green, probably the first guy I think of. He definitely got a shot kind of back on track in the second round. He really struggled in the beginning of the bubble and in the first round against Portland. But he's so huge because we talked about it. He's got the finals experience. Even just last year, he wanted to win a ring last year with Kawhi in Toronto. So he brings that championship pedigree. He brings very good defense for the two guard. He's not quite at the level that he was maybe with San Antonio, but I still think he's a very capable defender, and he's got the. I think he's been around long enough that he knows all the tips and the tricks and stuff like that. So he's got the mental advantage there. And if he can hit shots on the other end, that's going to be huge because LeBron's going to he's going to find you. If you're open, he's going to find you. The second guy probably. I mean, you can go a lot of different directions, right? You can go Kyle Kuzma. While his numbers maybe haven't been great, I think he is playing smarter, and I think he's playing very hard on defense. I think he's got a long way to go there, but he has made strides that I didn't think he was going to make during these playoffs in terms of, at least giving an attempt to guard the best player on the other teams for stretches, making good cuts on offense, not just settling for those ISO jumpers. So I think, he's someone there. Caruso, like we mentioned, I think one thing that is important is that LeBron definitely trusts these guys, I think, a lot more than some of his other
Prior
teammates.
teammates.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like he talked about Caruso hitting that big three in game 4 to kind of steal the win. He's like, I had complete confidence throwing him the ball. And LeBron will not, we know how LeBron works with the media. If he doesn't trust people, he's not going to go out there
Oh
and
yeah,
for
he'll
no
say.
reason. So I think, him showing he trusts, he trusts Rondo, he trusts Caruso, Danny Green. He trusts these guys in the big moments, which is huge because that's what you need, right? Things are going to break down and not always go according to game plan, and you got to be able to trust your teammates to make plays. If your shooting isn't going, if you're getting doubled consistently, whatever the circumstances are. So I think the trust is a huge factor. I think their chemistry is good. It's just them Miami probably have the best chemistry, right? These guys are always hanging out. They're always talking, so highly of each other. That's a huge factor. And then the fact that they're just playing well. Just like Miami, they're playing very well right now. I kind of see. I really stray from looking far ahead. I don't like to look past any series at all, and I'm not doing that anyway here. But it feels like we're on a collision course for like a Miami Lakers finals because of, and I think that the environment produces it. Right, these guys are isolated from the fans, from their most of their family and stuff. Like they haven't really been able to see them in a long time, and so you have to build that chemistry. You have to have good team chemistry. And I think both these teams are exemplifying that right now. And I think that's a big part of the reason why they're playing so well and why they're on the cusp of potentially making the finals. But I'm not going to look ahead. I only look at the next series and really the next game, which is game 1, which will be Friday against the Clippers and the Nuggets. We'll see what tomorrow brings us. And then we'll go from there. I'm sure we'll see. Tomorrow's Tuesday. So Wednesday we'll be back. We'll have game 1, I believe, already of the Celtics Heat. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Western Conference Finals preview because we'll talk about the Game 7 for the Clippers Nuggets. If anything else happens in that time frame, we'll talk about it. We'll see if Raj will be back. Hopefully he will be, and we can all have a good discussion again. Thanks for tuning in. Henry, thank you for coming on.
No, thank you.
As per usual, following us on both sports, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, anywhere that we're at, follow us, and we'll be back on Wednesday.